It was supposed to be just another award, another name called, another speech, another moment that would fade into the endless cycle of headlines. But this time, something felt different. Because when Kendrick Lamar walked up to that stage, the energy in the room shifted instantly. And what happened next left Drake at the center of a moment no one saw coming. At first, everything looked normal. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. The usual excitement filled the room. But then came that moment, the one fans can't stop replaying. Kendrick didn't celebrate wildly. He didn't overreact. Instead, he stayed calm, controlled, almost like he already knew the impact this would have. And that's when people started noticing Drake. Not because he said anything, but because of what he didn't do. No big reaction, no visible excitement, just a pause, a subtle, almost frozen expression that lasted only seconds, but felt much longer. And in today's world, seconds are all it takes. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Fans slowed it down, zoomed in, and analyzed every detail. Some said Drake looked caught off guard. Others believed he looked frustrated, like he realized this moment meant more than just losing an award. Because this wasn't just about recognition. It felt like a shift in momentum, a shift in narrative, and maybe even a shift in power. Because Kendrick's win didn't feel random. It felt like part of something bigger, a streak, a pattern, a message being sent without a single direct word. And the more fans connected the dots, the more intense the conversation became. Was this just another win? Or was this Kendrick reminding everyone exactly who controls the moment? Meanwhile, Drake's silence only made things louder. Because when one of the biggest artists in the world doesn't react the way people expect, people start asking questions. And those questions are now everywhere. Did Kendrick just flip the awards game in one move? And more importantly, was Drake ready for what that moment really meant? The moment didn't explode right away, and that's exactly what made it so powerful. When Kendrick Lamar stepped onto that stage to accept his award, it wasn't loud, dramatic, or chaotic. It was controlled, precise, almost surgical in the way it unfolded. And in a space where most artists rely on energy and emotion to dominate the moment, Kendrick did the opposite. He slowed everything down, from the way he walked, to the way he held the award, to the way he looked out into the crowd. Every detail felt intentional. Fans watching live didn't fully understand it at first. It looked like a simple win, another achievement in a career already filled with them. But then came the shift, because as the cameras panned across the audience, they landed on Drake, and that's when everything changed. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious, but it was enough. A pause, a stillness, a moment where Drake didn't react the way people expected him to. No immediate smile, no visible excitement, no quick clap that matched the energy of the room. Instead, there was a brief freeze, a microsecond that fans would later stretch into something much bigger. And once that clip hit social media, the moment took on a life of its own. Within minutes, fans were reposting it everywhere, slowing it down, zooming in, breaking it apart frame by frame. What originally lasted just seconds suddenly became hours of discussion, debate, and speculation. What was that look? Did he seem surprised? Was that frustration? Or was it something deeper? Those questions started flooding timelines. And the more people watched, the more convinced they became that this wasn't just a normal reaction. It meant something. That's when the narrative began to form. Because Kendrick's win didn't feel isolated. Fans started connecting it to everything that's been happening recently. His growing recognition, his consistent impact, the way his name keeps rising in conversations about influence and legacy. This award felt like another piece, another step in a streak, another reminder. And when you place that pattern next to Drake, an artist who has dominated the industry for years, it creates tension. Not obvious tension, not direct conflict, but a quiet, underlying pressure that fans can feel even if it's never openly addressed. That's what made Drake's reaction so important. Because in a moment where Kendrick looked completely in control, Drake looked human. And that contrast is what sparked everything. Fans began to revisit past moments between the two artists. Old award shows, past performances, even previous interviews. They started comparing reactions, analyzing body language, trying to find patterns. Had Drake shown this before? Was this new? Was this the first time something felt different? The deeper they looked, the more layers they found. At the same time, Kendrick's silence added even more weight to the situation. He didn't address Drake. He didn't hint at anything directly. His speech remained focused, calm, and free of any obvious messages. But somehow, that made it louder, because when nothing is said, everything becomes open to interpretation. Fans began reading into tone, posture, even the pacing of his words. Some believe Kendrick knew exactly how this would be perceived. Others thought it was simply his natural composure being interpreted as something bigger. Either way, the result was the same. The moment grew, and as it grew, it started to reshape how people were viewing both artists, not just in that room, but in the industry as a whole. Drake, known for his constant presence, his ability to stay visible and dominate charts, suddenly looked like he was reacting instead of leading. Even if that wasn't actually the case, the perception started to shift. And perception, in moments like this, is everything. Meanwhile, Kendrick's approach, minimal, controlled, and precise, began to feel even more powerful. Fans described it as effortless dominance. The idea that he didn't need to do much to take over a moment made it seem like he was operating on a completely different level. That contrast became the core of the conversation. Two artists, two completely different styles. One moment that brought them together in a way that couldn't be ignored. As the night went on, the award itself became secondary. The real story was a reaction, the tension, the subtle shift that fans believed they had just witnessed in real time. And by the end of it, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about who won. It was about what that win represented. And for many fans, it felt like Kendrick had just taken control of the moment, while Drake, for the first time in a long time, looked like he was caught in it. The question now wasn't what just happened. It was what happens next. Because when a moment like this hits, it doesn't just dissipate, it builds. As the award show continued, the ripple effect of that moment became impossible to ignore. What at first seemed like a minor expression on Drake's face quickly transformed into a full-blown Drake has always been viewed as a master of control. Every move he makes, every lyric, every public appearance, is calculated to maintain his position at the top. He is the embodiment of visibility and influence, constantly in the conversation, whether through his music, collaborations, or presence in media. But in this instance, the pause, the freeze, the almost imperceptible look on his face suggested something unexpected, a crack in that armor. Social media immediately seized upon the moment. Clips were posted, slowed down, and dissected. X threads debated every micro-expression. TikTok videos speculated wildly on what Drake's silence could indicate, with captions like "Drake finally sees the Kendrick effect," and "This award just changed everything." Every frame was scrutinized. Every second of footage became evidence. And the more people analyzed, the deeper the narrative dug itself in. That this wasn't just another award. This was a turning point. Fans began to revisit Kendrick's performance, noting his calm, composed, and almost serene demeanor on stage. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't brash. It wasn't designed to attract attention to himself at that moment. But that calmness only amplified the impact. By not overreacting, Kendrick allowed the award, and by extension the narrative, to speak for itself. Every gesture, every word in his brief speech was weighted with intent. And for Drake, who has built his career around maintaining momentum and presence, that precise contrast made it difficult to ignore. Analysts and fans alike began connecting this moment to a broader pattern. Kendrick's wins, his carefully timed releases, and his minimalistic public appearances all seem to reinforce the idea that he doesn't need to chase dominance. He commands it. Meanwhile, Drake's omnipresence, once a symbol of power, now appeared vulnerable under the lens of this new narrative. The industry watchers began framing it as more than just rivalry. They called it a psychological game, where perception matters as much as charts, awards, and streams. In real time, The pressure on Drake became evident not only through public perception, but also through commentary from insiders. Music journalists, commentators, and even fellow artists weighed in. Some pointed out that Drake had dominated the scene for over a decade, yet here was a moment that made even him appear unprepared, as if he hadn't anticipated the subtle but undeniable influence of Kendrick's presence. Other observers argued that Drake's pause was strategic, a calculated restraint to avoid appearing overly emotional or reactive in front of millions watching live. But that theory, too, reinforced the narrative, because either way, the moment gained significance. As conversations around the award intensified, fans began drawing comparisons to past award shows. They analyzed moments where Drake had faced competition, noting the ways he responded to wins and losses previously. Patterns emerged. In past instances, Drake's reactions were often more immediate, confident, and visibly celebratory, even when facing strong contenders. This time, however, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Even micro-expressions became meaningful to viewers. The slight pause before clapping, the almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes, the measured exhale. Meanwhile, Kendrick's controlled demeanor continued to dominate discussions. Fans noted that while Drake's reaction was a momentary freeze, Kendrick maintained composure without the need for exaggeration. He didn't need to show off. He didn't need to assert dominance verbally. His presence alone was enough to create impact, reinforcing the narrative that power in this rivalry is as much about perception and timing as it is about measurable success. By the next day, the moment had transcended the award show itself. It was everywhere: social media feeds, podcasts, news outlets, and fan forums. Hashtags trended as fans debated what the freeze meant. Comment sections filled with speculation. Was Drake affected? Was he caught off guard? Or was he simply calculating his next move? Each theory fueled another, amplifying the intensity and extending the narrative far beyond the stage. Some argued that this moment marked a rare vulnerability from Drake, a crack in the facade of his long-standing dominance. Others suggested it was evidence that Kendrick's strategic silence and precise presence had created an environment where even one of hip-hop's most confident figures could appear frozen. Regardless of interpretation, the consensus was clear. The award and that brief reaction had changed the story in real time, altering how both artists are perceived in the public eye. As fans and analysts continued dissecting the event, the broader implications became evident. It wasn't just about one award. It wasn't just about one reaction. This single moment highlighted the subtle dynamics of influence, timing, and presence in modern hip-hop. It demonstrated that dominance isn't only measured by output or chart performance, but also by the ability to control perception, narrative, and atmosphere in ways that can leave even the most seasoned artists temporarily unsettled. And so, as the industry watched, one thing became increasingly clear. This was a turning point, a moment that would be referenced for years. Not because Kendrick simply won an award, and not because Drake reacted, but because together, that interaction, minimal, precise, yet profound, shifted the conversation about power, influence, and legacy in hip-hop. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the heaviest weight, and a single award can change everything. As the narrative around that award continued to expand, it became clear that the moment wasn't just a fleeting incident. It was a catalyst that fans, media, and industry insiders would dissect for weeks. The micro-expression on Drake's face when Kendrick Lamar claimed the award had already started to take on a symbolic weight far beyond what either artist could have predicted. What seemed like a pause or a subtle reaction transformed into a defining moment in a rivalry that has dominated hip-hop discussions for over a decade. For Drake, the stakes have always been immense. His career is built on visibility, dominance, and an unshakable presence. He commands attention with nearly every move, from album releases to collaborations to media appearances. But in this instance, the freeze, the subtle hesitation, was more than a physical reaction. It was interpreted as an acknowledgement of Kendrick's power, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that fans hadn't seen before. And in a culture obsessed with perception, even the smallest gestures can carry enormous weight. Social media exploded immediately. Clips of the moment circulated across platforms: TikTok, X, Instagram, with captions highlighting the contrast between Kendrick's calm composure and Drake's momentary hesitation. Fans paused the footage frame by frame, debated every subtle facial expression, and created long threads connecting the moment to Drake's past reactions, recent releases, and ongoing career decisions. What initially lasted a few seconds had been others argued that Drake's reaction was deliberate, a calculated restraint meant to avoid giving too much away in front of millions of viewers. Either way, the moment had sparked a new level of interest and scrutiny. Fans began analyzing Kendrick's demeanor as well. His controlled, measured acceptance of the award became a talking point. Unlike many artists who rely on outward celebration, Kendrick's understated approach demonstrated confidence and dominance without needing to overtly assert it. In contrast, Drake's momentary freeze, subtle though it was, drew all the more attention precisely because it broke the pattern of his usually composed, calculated public persona. That contrast created a tension that fans quickly labeled as a turning point. The discussion soon spread to comparisons with past award shows and public moments. Fans revisited previous encounters where Drake had faced competition or high-stakes moments. They analyzed how he reacted in those scenarios, noting his confidence, quick smiles, and calculated responses. This moment, by contrast, seemed different. The subtle hesitation became a narrative pivot point. Fans believed it revealed a rare human element, a micro-expression that hinted at awareness, pressure, or even slight surprise. This heightened scrutiny wasn't limited to casual fans. Industry insiders, music journalists, and commentators began examining the implications for both artists. The conversation shifted from simply who won the award to what does this mean for the ongoing dynamic between Drake and Kendrick. Many argued that the moment highlighted an evolving rivalry, one that no longer relies on direct confrontation or diss tracks, but instead operates through perception, presence, and timing. Kendrick's calm victory and Drake's subtle pause became a masterclass in how influence can be exercised without words. Some fans suggested that the moment symbolized more than competition. They interpreted Drake's reaction as an acknowledgement of the pressure that Kendrick's methodical strategy places on even the most dominant artist. While Drake maintains an unassailable record of success, Kendrick's approach to impact, appearing selectively, executing precisely, and letting absence amplify presence, creates a constant, invisible tension. This tension, fans argued, is what made Drake's subtle freeze feel so significant. Meanwhile, discussions online began to focus on the psychological implications of the rivalry. Social media users highlighted how perception shapes reality, particularly in modern hip-hop culture. Even a fleeting expression can carry immense meaning when it aligns with a broader narrative. Fans speculated that this moment might mark a shift in how Drake positions himself publicly, whether he leans into vulnerability, recalibrates his strategy, or uses it to amplify his next move. As the analysis intensified, the broader implications for both artists' legacies became a central theme. Kendrick's win wasn't just a victory for the night. It symbolized the ongoing influence he wields in shaping narratives, controlling perception, and commanding attention. Drake's subtle reaction, in contrast, revealed that even a titan of consistency could be affected by another artist's precision and calculated presence. This interplay between dominance, perception, and strategy became the focus of intense debate. By the end of the week, the incident had moved beyond a single award or event. It became a cultural touchstone, a moment that defined a new chapter in one of hip-hop's most closely watched dynamics. Fans, analysts, and media outlets continued to replay the scene, dissect it, and speculate on what comes next. It was clear that the subtle freeze, Kendrick's calm demeanor, and the ensuing discussion had permanently altered how both artists are perceived. In the midst of this scrutiny, one question looms largest: how will Drake respond? Will he adapt, recalibrate, and reclaim the narrative? Or will Kendrick's controlled, understated approach continue to shape the conversation in his favor? As the story unfolds, it becomes increasingly evident that the impact of this single award and that fleeting moment of hesitation may resonate far longer than anyone initially anticipated. altering perception, shaping strategies, and influencing the legacy of two of hip-hop's biggest names for years to come. As the days following the awards show unfolded, the narrative around Drake and Kendrick Lamar began to expand beyond the moment itself. What fans had initially perceived as a subtle pause or micro-expression started to feel like a larger commentary on dominance, strategy, and influence within the music industry. It wasn't just about one award. It was about how the moment reflected an ongoing dynamic between two of hip-hop's biggest figures, each operating with distinct approaches to power and perception. Kendrick's calm, controlled acceptance became a symbol of his methodical dominance. He didn't need to overreact or flaunt his achievement. The audience responded naturally to the composure he exuded, reinforcing the idea that influence doesn't always require visibility or verbal assertion. In contrast, Drake's freeze, slight as it was, became a point of fascination. Fans argue that it revealed the weight of Kendrick's presence, even when he wasn't actively engaging in direct competition. The conversations online didn't just analyze the moment itself. They dissected the implications. Commentators explored how Drake's constant visibility, once a tool of authority, now looks vulnerable in the face of Kendrick's precise and calculated approach. They argued that while Drake relies on volume, consistency, and omnipresence to dominate the industry, Kendrick achieves influence by strategic appearances and carefully timed moves, allowing absence and restraint to amplify impact. This contrast created a tension that fascinated fans, analysts, and fellow artists alike. The scrutiny extended to social media timelines. Fans revisited past award shows, concerts, and public appearances, comparing reactions and body language. Every gesture Drake made in prior events was weighed against his recent moment of hesitation. Was this a deviation from his norm, or simply a rare, fleeting human response? Fans debated endlessly, dissecting expressions, pauses, and subtle cues. Even small things, like the angle of his smile or the timing of a clap, were analyzed as if they held deeper meaning about the ongoing rivalry. As the narrative deepened, theories began to emerge about the psychological dynamics at play. Some argued that Drake's subtle reaction indicated awareness of Kendrick's influence and acknowledgement that, even at the height of his career, he was subject to external pressure. Others suggested that it was a deliberate choice, a calculated pause meant to manage perception while maintaining control in a highly scrutinized environment. Either way, the moment became symbolic, demonstrating how perception often matters as much as performance in the modern music industry. This evolving conversation also highlighted the role of social media and fan engagement. Platforms like X, TikTok, and Instagram allowed micro-moments to be amplified. Meanwhile, Kendrick's strategic silence remained a key factor. By not responding to Drake or the growing online speculation, he allowed the narrative to evolve naturally. Each interpretation, each replay of the clip, reinforced his influence. Fans described this as a masterclass in control, dominating a cultural moment without needing to assert dominance overtly. In contrast, Drake's highly visible persona meant every subtle reaction is analyzed, intensifying the impact of even minor gestures. The media also began weighing in, framing the moment as a turning point in the ongoing dynamic between the two artists. Coverage focused less on the award itself and more on how perception, presence, and narrative control shape influence in modern hip-hop. Analysts argued that Kendrick's methodical approach to visibility allows him to command attention without appearing desperate or reactive, whereas Drake's omnipresence, while powerful, makes every reaction open to scrutiny. By the end of the week, the moment had transcended a single event. It became a cultural touchstone, sparking debates about legacy, influence, and strategy. Fans and commentators alike suggested that the subtle micro-expression of Drake and the calm composure of Kendrick were not just isolated reactions but reflections of broader career philosophies. Drake's moment of hesitation symbolized human vulnerability within an environment of constant visibility, while Kendrick's precision highlighted the power of restraint and deliberate action. As the conversation continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the narrative isn't over. Drake's next move will be scrutinized for indications of strategy, reaction, or adaptation, while Kendrick's approach ensures that his presence continues to shape perception without directing. The subtle interplay of action, reaction, and narrative control has elevated what could have been a single fleeting moment into a defining chapter in modern hip-hop history. Ultimately, this award show moment demonstrated that influence in the music industry is about more than talent, sales, or streaming numbers. It's about perception, timing, and strategic control of a narrative. One subtle pause, one controlled walk, and one carefully measured speech can ripple across social media, fan forums, and the broader industry, reshaping conversations for weeks, or even years, to come. And for both Drake and Kendrick, the implications of that night are only beginning to unfold. By the time the night ended and the award was in Kendrick Lamar's hands, the energy surrounding the event had shifted in ways that would be felt far beyond the stage. What initially seemed like just another accolade had become something much more. A defining cultural moment that highlighted the subtle power dynamics between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. The micro-expression, the slight hesitation, and the momentary pause by Drake were already becoming points of endless discussion, and the ripple effect would only grow from there. It wasn't about who had the bigger win on paper. Drake still commands chart dominance, streams, and media attention at a scale that few can match. Kendrick, meanwhile, demonstrates an equally formidable influence in his own way, through timing, narrative control, and the ability to dominate conversation without uttering a single word. And that contrast became the story that fans and commentators could not stop analyzing. Following the award show, social media exploded with breakdowns of every second of the moment. TikTok creators slowed the footage frame by frame, highlighting Drake's subtle reactions and Kendrick's measured composure. X-Threads dissected body language, interpreting the pauses and micro-expressions as psychological cues. Instagram Reels juxtaposed clips of past award shows to show how different Drake's response appeared this time. Fans were debating endlessly. Had Kendrick's presence genuinely affected Drake, or were viewers reading too much into a fleeting moment? Meanwhile, the industry itself took notice. Journalists, music analysts, and fellow artists began weighing in. Some argued that Drake had been caught off guard, a rare crack in the armor of a performer who usually maintains near-constant composure. Others contended that Drake's subtle hesitation was calculated, a deliberate choice to maintain control while managing perception in a highly scrutinized environment. Either way, the moment became symbolic, representing more than an award. It symbolized the ongoing psychological and cultural tension between two of the genre's most influential figures. The narratives around the two artists also began to shift. Drake, known for his constant visibility and relentless drive to dominate conversation, suddenly appeared more reactive than usual. The freeze, subtle as it was, hinted at the pressure of performing under the weight of Kendrick's methodical influence. Kendrick, on the other hand, demonstrated the power of minimalism. By not overreacting, he allowed his victory and calm demeanor to dominate the cultural dialogue, amplifying his impact without overt effort. As the public and media continued to analyze the event, the implications grew beyond the award show itself. Fans revisited past interactions, collaborations, and performances, looking for patterns that might explain this new dynamic. They considered Drake's recent projects, lyrical themes, and public behavior, interpreting these in the context of Kendrick's strategic approach. Social media theory and speculation turned the micro-expression into a larger narrative about strategy, influence, and generational shifts in hip-hop. In parallel, Kendrick's silence and poise amplified his perceived power. By choosing not to respond directly to Drake or engage in overt posturing, he controlled the narrative without words. This approach forced observers to focus on the subtle cues, the quiet confidence, the controlled movements, the lack of emotional overreaction, creating a sense that Kendrick operates on a level above conventional competition. Fans began framing this as a masterclass in influence. Sometimes the most impactful moves are those left unsaid. Drake's reaction, conversely, became a mirror for public interpretation. The micro-expression, while fleeting, took on amplified meaning because of the contrast with his usual visible composure. Analysts suggested that even the most dominant performers are subject to perception, and that in an era where social media magnifies every second of footage, no moment is too small to influence a narrative. This single pause, therefore, became a defining lens through which fans viewed both artists' strategies. A subtle reaction can reverberate across social media, fan communities, and media outlets, altering perception in ways that traditional metrics cannot capture. By the end of the week, the narrative had solidified. One award, one brief micro-expression, had transformed into a cultural talking point with lasting implications. Fans, analysts, and industry observers agreed that this was more than a fleeting incident. It represented the intersection of strategy, perception, and influence, demonstrating that modern hip-hop dominance is as much about controlling narrative and perception as it is about producing hits. Ultimately, what this moment revealed is that the dynamic between Drake and Kendrick is far from simple. It is layered, psychological, and ongoing. The freeze, the composure, the tension, all of it will continue to shape conversations, music releases, and cultural interpretation. And as both artists move forward, the world will be watching every gesture, every lyric, and every performance, aware that in modern hip-hop, even the smallest moments can have enormous consequences. This single award, this brief moment, didn't just mark a victory, it set the stage for a new chapter in the rivalry, one defined by influence, strategy, and perception. And in that chapter, every move, every pause, and every subtle expression matters. Now that you've seen how one award and a single subtle moment can shift the entire narrative between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, it's time to weigh in. Fans everywhere are dissecting every gesture, every expression, and every microsecond, and the conversation is far from over. Do you think Drake's reaction was a rare glimpse of vulnerability or a calculated pause in the middle of a high-stakes cultural moment? Could Kendrick's calm, controlled approach redefine how influence works in modern hip-hop? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your take. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next development in this ongoing saga. With the stakes this high, every move matters. And trust us, you'll want to be here when the story continues to unfold. Fire!